Our guest is Raheem Kassam. He's the author of the new book, No-Go Zones, How Sharia Law is Coming to a Neighborhood Near You, forwarded by Nigel Farage. So we're going to talk about his book and the issue of Sharia law in America. But actually, you were in Charlottesville, and you had a first-hand perspective of the violence that's there. You said you wanted to start there. Thank you for joining us today, Raheem.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me.
So tell me, go ahead. What did you experience in Charlottesville?
Well, you know, we got scrambled there after all the violence stopped, but we did see a lot of the aftermath, which included Antifa and violent leftists walking around the streets with bats, with 2x4s, you know, presumably attached to placards maybe once upon a time, but they weren't at that point. We heard horror stories. I spoke to a guy on the street who told me that he was told by somebody that it was the wrong day to be white in Charlottesville. And then it plays into what you were saying about Lord before the break. Doesn't matter, by the way, if you're wearing a Trump hat or not. Lord is basically inciting violence against all white people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so, you know, this is what was going on in the aftermath in Charlottesville. Incredibly sad scenes, actually, to see a town like that, which is obviously very beautiful and historic, have to have thousands of police, you know, very heavily militarized police, deployed onto the streets. And, of course, Governor Terry McAuliffe whisked into the building. He's a big gun control advocate, but he didn't mind being whisked in by lots of men with guns. One rule for them, another for us. And, you know, he gave this press conference afterwards, and I was sitting in the front row, and it was a litany of hatred against conservatives. Now, of course, I think that there's no justification for the murder on the Saturday there, and of course, I don't have much truck with any truck with the groups carrying tiki torches and doing all that sort of. But at the same time, I asked Terry McAuliffe 5 times if he would condemn Antifa as well and the violent leftists, and I didn't even ask him to condemn them in equal terms, in equal measure. I just asked him to condemn them, and I basically had to shout this question at him 5 times. No answer whatsoever.
Raheem Kassam, his new book is No-Go Zones, How Sharia Law is Coming to a Neighborhood Near You. He's also the editor-in-chief of Breitbart, but we're discussing what happened in Charlottesville. He was there for that. You know, Raheem, there's this rush to judgment on these things, and you have to be very careful with this stuff. There's this rush to judgment to immediately demonize this group, immediately demonize that group. Where I've learned in my young time doing this here, working for InfoWars and Alex Jones, to sometimes wait, be patient, gather all the intel, gather all the evidence, and then take your stance. And I'm ready to take the stance again. I didn't want to rush to judgment and just say, oh, Antifa's responsible for everything. Oh, they didn't do anything wrong with the white nationalists. But I did the further research, backed by what you just said. It is clear to me that it was Antifa out there inciting violence. It was Antifa that was out there being violent, beating people, bringing weapons, hitting cars. And now people are going to say, oh, look, he's standing up for the white supremacists. He's with the alt-right. No, I'm just pointing out the facts, and that's what you saw on the street.
Absolutely. You know, we live in the bizarro world at the moment where apparently if you point out the facts, it means you're taking a position that you're not taking. I mean, I don't think anybody is siding with the person that decided to run people over. I don't think anybody is siding, and I've not heard anybody, by the way, siding from a conservative perspective, from a libertarian perspective, siding with the guys who you know, had their tiki torches out and acting like morons in Charlottesville. But you know what? You have a First Amendment in this country. If they want to do that, that's their right. What isn't right is that the police especially, and I have a suspicion that the order came from above, I think it was maybe a political order, but the police didn't effectively keep those groups apart. We've seen it in Europe a lot, by the way, when 2 groups like that, whether it's Antifa versus hard right organizations, or whether they're just patriotic groups that are marching, or anti-terrorist groups that are marching, Antifa goes in with the express you know, will to try and cause carnage and destruction, and the police put these groups next to each other. What do they think is going to happen?
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a premeditated thought that they want to go out there, hit a Trump supporter, hit a car with a bat, be violent. They have a history of that. Now, I'm curious, though, how close... I'm sorry?
They've done it to me. I've been hit with a ladder in the face. I've been hit with placards. They try and get a rise out of you. They know they can, if they kick you, they try and trip you up. They know somebody like me, especially, might turn around and sock it to them. And at that point, that's when the cameras start flashing. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, that's true. And they usually will try to run at that point as well. They'll scamper away like a cockroach to light. How close were you to the car accident that was fatal for Heather Heyer?
Oh, well, we actually got there a couple of hours afterwards. But,
okay.
We saw the street where the street was on lockdown when we were there. Of course, as I said, incredibly sad to see a city in America transfigured into this. Really what we're talking about here, by the way, is two groups, and I think we can say with some certainty, fringe groups that the media is trying to play up. And on the Antifa side, they're writing hagiographical pieces about them. I don't know if you saw this disgusting Yahoo News piece yesterday, heaping praise upon Antifa. And on the other side, CNN trying to play up these other groups, these what they call hard right groups. I'm not sure they have any level of conservatism within them. They're nationalists, they're national socialists, as far as I'm concerned. But let's have some historical perspective here. These are two groups who are basically trying to relitigate the Spanish Civil War. These two groups find their backgrounds in the 1930s, and I'm not talking about Germany. We're not playing Godwin's law here. We're talking about the Spanish Civil War, where you have the communist group, the Trotskyist group, and that's where Antifa was founded. Don't forget, it was originally supposed to be a Trotskyist combat squad, and on the other side you have people who are quite happy to wear the fascist label. That's what we're seeing. It would be nice if somebody, I'm going to point to my TV up here, it would be nice if somebody had an intellectual analysis to bring onto CNN or even, quite frankly, onto Fox News, but they don't. We just live in this vacuous Orwellian environment where everything is new and there is no history and we can't learn anything, and we have to treat everything like it's some sort of new phenomenon. It's not.
I think that outside of Lou Dobbs and Sean Hannity, you're completely correct. I think Tucker Carlson goes down there, but he doesn't get as analytical. He just kind of exposes it with his interviews. But, it's amazing to me. You've dealt with Antifa. I don't know how much you've dealt with them. I have to deal with them all the time when I get sent out to rallies or sent out to do interviews with people or sent out to events. No, this is the weirdest thing to me. 95% of Antifa is white. 95% of Antifa are white people. And then maybe 4% are Latino. And then and I don't even know if I've ever seen a black Antifa member. To be honest, I don't even see any black people in Antifa. And then I see that black people are standing up for Confederate monuments now. Black groups are standing up for Confederate monuments, saying you're not going to erase American history. But meanwhile, they sit here and they act like Antifa is fighting the racist, even though they're all white racists against whites.
And they have the audacity, by the way. My name is Raheem Kassam, and look at me. They have the audacity to call me a racist, to call me a bigot, to call me a xenophobe, because I have conservative views. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous what these people are getting away with. And there's a reason, by the way, that you don't see Antifa versus conservative debates happening on television. Why Jake Tapper doesn't want to organize these debates, because he knows that somebody like me would wipe the floor with them, from a rhetorical and intellectual perspective. Somebody like yourself, probably most of your audience as well, quite frankly. They don't have an intellectual leg to stand on. And when you look at what they stand for, rather than what they stand against, it appears to be the complete and utter destruction of what it is America has offered the world, and what preceded America as well, quite frankly. My country, the United Kingdom, and this is where we can draw two things together. You're seeing statues being pulled down. Of course, they're not pulling down the Lenin statue in the Fremont neighborhood of Seattle. They're only pulling down the Confederate statues. Lenin, of course, being responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. But let's forget about that, right? And on the other side of it, you look at mass migration, you look at open borders, all of these things that they try and further and pursue, and the funders who help them do this. It takes us into another area, and it's the area of my book that you mentioned at the top of the interview, which is no-go zones. This is something else that they defend. because it leads to the destruction of Western civilization. It leads to the destruction of the United Kingdom, of France, of the Netherlands, of Belgium, and indeed of the United States too, if you're not careful. And I studied this for some time, and we've got the book out now. And the book actually goes into some detail about the radical leftist groups, who their funders are as well, and how these two issues marry up.
Yeah, I know that was what you said before we came on, how you can actually tie in the two issues with what's going on in America. And really, it's because they've aligned themselves with radical elements of what I just view as a 19th century practice of a religion, Sharia law. I mean, that's what it is to me. This is old times. Nobody treats women like this anymore. Nobody has ideals like this anymore. And also, when you talk about how Antifa can't hold their stance in a debate, yeah, it really goes to show how empty they are intellectually, how completely empty they are. Real quick, we're about to go to a break. We're going to bring you back up on the other side. But talk about the relation of your book and what we're seeing with Antifa on the streets.
Well, it's simple and it's complicated at the same time. So I'll be as brief as possible. These guys, they want to destroy Western civilization as we know it. Like I said, this is a continuation of the Trotskyist narrative from the 1930s. Anybody who's ever read a book about read a history book, and believe me, these guys haven't, but our side does.
So there it is. We'll be right back. We'll be right back with Raheem Kassam. Here's the book. They want to take down America, folks. That's why the left is allying with radical Islam. It all is to take down Western culture. We'll be right back. The book is No-Go Zones. The author is Raheem Kassam. He's also the editor-in-chief of Breitbart London. And you go through this book, and you'll see well documented what has happened in Europe with the infiltration of Muslims coming across the border without any vetting, any checking, any control over the process, just all in the name of tolerance and self-righteousness. But you read all this and, you do a good job, Raheem, documenting all of this in the book. It's got the evidence, it's got the proof. But, as someone in America, I sit here and I say, how can this come to the streets of America? A no-go zone in America? Not in my country. What say you?
Well, what are you going to do about it?
I don't know. I guess I'm going to have you on to explain it to me.
The reason I'm so flippant in an answer like that is that, I've heard that for so long now, because I've been writing the book and we've been doing a lot of publicity surrounding it. And people say to me, oh, that can't happen here. We've got our guns and we're strong people. And we don't. And that's all true. But unless you're going to, march a militia through the streets of Hamtramck in Michigan, which I suspect probably isn't the most constructive thing you could do, not at this point anyway. I mean, I don't suspect that we'll ever get there. At least I hope you don't. What are you going to do about it? Because it's not going to happen in an area that is preternaturally disposed to having conservatives who own guns in it. It's going to happen in areas like Hamtramck in Michigan. It's happening in Dearborn in Michigan. It's happening in Minnesota. It's happening in some places in New York State as well. These are more likely than not areas that elect Democrats, and it's the Democrats that impose these policies that allow these things to happen. Those policies are very welfarist policies. They are sanctuary city type policies. In Hamtramck, I mean, it's a majority Muslim city council now. It's a 2.1 square mile city, and it has an upper estimate of 17 mosques in this place, the lower estimate being 12. That's still a mosque every third or fourth street corner, depending on which way you look at it. They play the Islamic call to prayer out on the streets in Hamtramck. The locals just have to deal with it now. That's the way it is. Even the New York Times, even the fake news New York Times, reported on this in 2004. I'm not sure they report on it anymore. They seem to have changed their priorities. But this is documented. It's here in the United States. The niqab, the burqa. All those sorts of things are already here. We know there are terror cells here. There are private Islamic compounds in New York State and South Carolina. So when I hear, oh, no, it can't happen in America, firstly, I'm saying, well, it already is here. And secondly, well, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and I was just playing devil's advocate there. And, and the truth is, though, but the truth is, you hit it on the head. See, it's not that they're just going to be able to walk into your community and set up camp. No, they have to have the government get behind it, and they have to use liberal politicians pushing virtue signaling ideas saying be politically correct, be tolerant. Oh, these people have been hated by so much. We have to embrace them. We have to let them in. And then it just gets out of control. And like you said, it ends up with the situations like we've seen in Europe where there's no-go zones. You literally can't walk across the street if you're a white man, or you will probably get beaten. But it's amazing to me that people wouldn't understand this even though they can see it, because the answer to me is obvious. You can come to this country, you can immigrate, you can have whatever religion you want. You have to assimilate. You have to like American culture. I'm sorry, if you don't like going to a football game and a bunch of people drinking beer and cheering and hooting and hollering and a bunch of cheerleaders in bikinis, then I'm sorry, you're probably not going to fit in here.
Well, cheers to that. And just to tie these two things together again, I predict the next monument the left is going to go after is Mount Rushmore, not because of the slave-owning Washington and Jefferson stuff, but because Teddy Roosevelt is on that memorial, and he once said that the immigrants should recognize we have one country, one flag, one language, and if you can't integrate and you can't assimilate, then you have to go back. That man is on Mount Rushmore, and prepare for there to be an onslaught about that.
Yeah, I mean, how dare we have a country that brings anyone in, has a process, and then asks them to appreciate our country and like us because we invited them into our house. I mean, I don't know about you, Raheem, but when I have guests into my house, I say, yeah, just trash the place. Just trash the place. Just do what you want.
Take over my bedroom, and you can perform your female genital mutilation.
Yeah,
surgery.
female genitally mutilate my daughter and put a hood over my wife. Yeah, please.
Right. This is something that we're just not getting at the moment. And I was surprised to find out when I was asked to write this book by Regnery that there is no other book on this out there. It's the first of its kind.
Yeah, that's what Nigel said in his foreword. He was shocked at that.
Yeah, I was too.
So here's the book, folks. No-Go Zones. Thank you for sending me the advanced copy, Raheem. No-Go Zones. Raheem Kassam is the author. He's also the editor-in-chief of Breitbart London. Check out the book, folks. Like he said, well, it can't happen here. It'll never happen here. Well, what are you going to do about it? It happened in Europe. They did nothing. The politicians did something. They let it happen. Don't let it happen here. Thank you, Raheem.